Welcome to the Texas Take. I'm your host, Jeremy Wallace, and look what I've gone and done, y'all. Totally different feel to all this. You see we are at Stubb's in Austin, Texas. Not only some of the best barbecue you're going to get, but a really big-time music venue that is just near and dear to my heart, and I think a lot of people in Texas, not just in Austin. And look who I have with me. Beto O'Rourke. You know Beto O'Rourke, obviously, as the guy who ran for governor and made it the closest race for governor we saw in a long time. He ran for the Senate, nearly won a Senate seat, a former El Paso councilman. I don't want to ever forget that because that's where the foundation of all this, began. And the reason I wanted to get you on this show was to talk about, let me just go straight to it. Why the heck didn't you run? It's for months, it felt like you were, telling us you were willing to run if the situation called for it. Obviously lots of excitement about this cycle, and you didn't run. So tell us, why didn't you decide to run, and what were the factors involved?
So the only factor that mattered to me was what I could do to help this country, to help our state, to help the people who are being hurt, devastated, killed by this administration. And every option was on the table. Running for office, running for any office, not running for office, getting the hell out of the way, getting involved. And as I looked at and talked to the field of potential candidates, from Jasmine Crockett to James Talarico to Gina Hinojosa, it's really clear to me that we had a lot of really strong Texans, many of them currently holding office, who are going to be absolutely terrific candidates. I also saw a very pressing need for the kind of organizing work that doesn't get the attention, the headlines, the sensational coverage that a campaign or a candidacy gets. The kind of work that I'm doing with Powered by People right now. We have thousands of volunteers across the state of Texas who are out there meeting future voters. Yesterday, we spent all day on the University of Texas campus. Today, I'll be on the Austin Community College campus. Approaching complete strangers, verifying their registration information, updating it if it needs to be changed, registering them if they've never been on the rolls before. And then the kicker is our volunteers stay in touch with these new voters, not on a text blast basis, but person to person, peer to peer, human to human. It is an incredibly effective way to organize. We piloted this program in 2024. And those young voters, 18 to 29-year-olds that came through our program, turned out at a rate of 80%. To put that in context, 18 to 29-year-olds nationally turned out at a rate of 42%. In Texas, that same demographic turned out at a rate of 37%. So we doubled the likelihood of somebody voting and turning out. So I just thought, look, if in 2025 and in 2026, we can focus on this program across the 254 counties of Texas, whether Jasmine or James is our Senate candidate, whether it's Gina or somebody else for governor, we're going to make sure that we have enough net new Democratic voters who aren't just on the rolls, but are engaged, involved, informed, and turn out to vote. That could make the difference. And it's exactly the kind of thing that I wish were in place when I was running in 2018. As you know, Jeremy, I lost by 215,000 más o menos votes in that contest, 2.5%. What if there were volunteers who were out there in 2015, 2016, 2017 doing precisely this kind of work? I'd be talking to you as a junior senator from the state of Texas right now. So I'm doing what millions of my fellow Americans, hundreds of thousands of my fellow Texans are doing right now. I'm doing what I can with what I have, where I am, to make sure that we come through and save the country.
Well, and let me, hitting on that again, it's so you earlier on, you were organizing. I saw you almost being a de facto Democratic Party as you were going around the state and holding rallies, trying to recruit candidates, inspiring people. Hey, you can run too. I heard you telling people, to get involved. It's and you had all of the big Democratic candidates you just mentioned. We had, there was an event that you and I were at in Austin, and the Texas Take listeners will remember we had audio from, Joaquin Castro and Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico and Greg Casar and yourself. And I'm sitting there thinking, hey, they're working on a super team, a super ticket. They're working with each other. Joaquin Castro, he and I have talked on this program as well about just how they were trying to coordinate as much as they could. It didn't work out kind of like they wanted to, and some things went wrong. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What was the genesis of that, and what was your involvement? Did you reach out to to Jasmine and Joaquin and say, is there some way we can kind of work out a deal here to figure out who runs for what?
Yeah, I've made it my mission to ensure that we have a Democrat running at every place on the ticket, and not just any Democrat, but Democrats who can talk to voters, who can present a compelling vision, who have a great track record, who can raise money and put the resources in to bear, who can recruit and deploy volunteers so that we have a fighting chance to win these races. And when I say every position on the ballot, for the first time in Texas history, as far as records go back, we have a Democrat contesting every state house race, every state Senate race, every U.S. congressional race, and of course, the big marquee races, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, U.S. Senate, land commissioner, on down the line. And so, yeah, I talked to Joaquin and Jasmine and James and Gina and so many others who are running right now. But I also talked to people to encourage them to run for state house seats in places like Waco or Collin County, the kind of communities that far too often have not seen a Democrat run. And look, to acknowledge the skepticism that you and others who are listening and watching might have, some of these folks are not going to win their races. Yeah. It's tough to win in Amarillo as a Democrat. But we're never going to win in Amarillo if we don't have Democrats today in 2026 willing to put their names out there, willing to go meet and talk with voters, to carry the case, to literally be on the ballot in November. That is planting the seeds for future success in that community. But even more importantly, given how critical these midterm elections are in 2026, that new candidate in Amarillo is going to reach and mobilize voters that our Senate nominee will never have the time to meet.
Exactly.
And those votes in Amarillo will flow up to the top of the ticket all the way to that U.S. Senate race. I was the beneficiary of that in 2018. A large part of the reason that I got so close to Ted Cruz is that you had fantastic state house candidates like James Talarico, fantastic congressional candidates like Colin Allred, folks who had no business running because they were competing against entrenched, well-funded incumbents like Pete Sessions, who was an absolute kingmaker in the House, but he lost to Colin Allred because he was a fantastic candidate. It was an amazing year. Donald Trump was deeply unpopular, and we were mobilizing at every place on the ballot. So part of the reason I'm so optimistic, given how dark these days are in Texas and in this country right now, is that we have Democrats running all across the state. The big races that you're going to be talking about on the show and the little unknown races in every single one of the 254 counties of Texas. So yes, I've been having those conversations, but just so you know, it's not just in the high profile races, it's across the board and down the ballot.
So did they just say, no, we can't come to an agreement? Did we just end up in the end where like Colin Allred and James Talarico were just like, no, we're both running for the U.S.
Yeah, essentially, that's exactly what happened. And, kudos to everyone for trying, for coming together to see like, look, so here was my theory of the case. If in 2018, in addition to all those great down ballot candidates whose incredible energy and campaign skills I benefited from, our campaign benefited from at the top of the ticket, if we had, say, Joaquin or Julian Castro running for governor, if we'd had someone like James Talarico or Jasmine Crockett running for lieutenant governor or attorney general, imagine the resources, the campaign firepower, the excitement that we would have been able to bring into that competition. Again, it would have lifted everybody's chances of getting across the line. So that was the impetus for the phone calls I made. And look, I tried to take my ego and any political career I might have out of the equation. What is the best for Texas? What is the best for this country? How do we put the best team together? And the upshot is that the Democratic electorate, over the course of these next few months leading into March 3rd, will make that decision. At the most exciting race right now statewide, the U.S. Senate race, you have two generational talents who could not be more different in their approach to campaigning and to politics, but who both have a common goal. They want to see this country do better. They want to defeat Trumpism and this MAGA movement, and they want to deliver for the people of Texas. Both can raise money. Both can raise extraordinary awareness through their social media profiles.
A lot of talent in one corner of the ballot.
It's amazing.
Right? Yeah.
And I just know from spending the day at the UT campus yesterday, it has got everybody's attention. People are watching this race, and whoever emerges as a nominee will be the beneficiary of all that. And I'm just absolutely confident that whoever loses that nominating contest will get behind the winner. And those two will complement each other, along with all of us who are working behind the scenes to make sure that they defeat Ken Paxton or John Cornyn or whoever the Republicans put up for their Senate nominee.
Well, like you said, that ballot feeds up and down, right? It's like we've talked about this a lot. When you were running in 2018, that, and not just to call an all-racy, but if you look at what was happening in Houston, we had record numbers of candidates running in races, even the ones that they couldn't win. It's like we had people taking on some Republicans who didn't look like they had much of a shot, but they were out there getting people, ready to go vote, right? They were making those contacts. They were going to the doors. I remember being with John Busey in Round Rock, or he was trying to campaign up here, knocking on the doors. So that energy he was trying to create is beyond what you guys are doing on your campaign, obviously, but it helps up the ticket, and what you're doing up the ticket helps down the ticket. So it all becomes part of this, like, whenever the Democratic Party can kind of work all together, I know there's some people laughing at that when the Democratic Party can work together, right?
Right.
Somebody told me once, and maybe only people on the Gulf Coast will get this reference, but it's like crabs in a bucket sometimes. And crabs in the bucket, what that means is that if you ever see a bunch of crabs in a bucket, one starts crawling to the top, and the other ones will pull them back down. And so there's these internal rivalries that start happening, and other Democrats start blowing up each other, which leads me to, okay, maybe not the easiest way to do this, but so you haven't picked in this race for the Senate, right? Have you endorsed? Do you think you might endorse at some point before the primary?
No. Look, we're the party that says that it believes in democracy, in self-government, in the ability for people to freely and fairly choose who will represent them. I believe in that. And I believe in the Democratic voters of the state of Texas who are going to have a real close and personal look at these two phenomenal candidates that we have in James and Jasmine. And they're going to make the best decision, not only those who conform to their values, not only based on the track record, but I think they're also going to take into account who they think is going to be able to win in November. Because, Jeremy, at least in my mind, this election is for all the marbles. If Democrats lose, then the consolidation of power in the hands of the president will be unstoppable. This slide to authoritarianism, I think, will reach its natural conclusion. We will live in a fascist country where it will be completely normal, not exceptional as it is now, for masked, plainclothes federal agents to come and sweep you up off the streets without warrants or badges, to either imprison you or deport you to a country that you have never been from. The corruption and criminality that we see from the Trump crime family and their associates will be the de facto fascist state ruling party in this country going forward. We won't have free and fair elections. The Republican majority that you have now will roll out the royal red carpet for a Trump third term or his designated successor. On the other side, if Democrats win, and if we win congressional races in Texas, and if we win this Senate race, which is what puts us over to 51 votes in the U.S. Senate, then you have a check on Trump's lawlessness. You have accountability for his crimes. You have the very real possibility of free and fair elections in 2028. Trump sees that, right? He understands that Democrats with subpoena power as committee chairs in Congress in 2027 are going to bring his crimes to light, that he's going to lose the White House in 2028, and there will be no Merrick Garland 2.0. Justice will be full and justice will be swift for him, for his family, and for his associates. That explains him trying to rig the elections in Texas, redraw the maps mid-decade. It explains him trying to, through executive order, outlaw mail-in voting. It explains him telling the New York Times last week, "I wish I had sent the National Guard to seize the voting machines in the 2020 election." It explains not only him inciting a violent insurrection on the Capitol in 2021, but pardoning every one of those who beat a Capitol police officer, some nearly to death, 5 of whom took their lives in the days following that insurrection attempt. You know, the best predictor of future behavior is past performance. We know exactly what this president is going to do. The only question is, how are we going to make sure that we respond in kind, not lawlessly, not violently, peacefully, democratically, but ruthlessly focused on winning political power? And Jeremy, I think this all comes down to the state of Texas. So that's why I'm out here right now. I'm not paid for it. I'm a volunteer with Powered by People. I'm not on the ballot. I may never hold political office again, But I know that this one is for the greatest stakes possible. Our children's future, the future of this country, 250 years into this great experiment. Will we, as Abraham Lincoln asked, meanly lose or nobly save the last best hope of Earth? We have got to come through.
Well, and you look at what's interesting about your situation, there's so many people who run for statewide office, and after they lose, they go, I tried, y'all. And boom, they're gone. They become lobbyists, wherever they end up going. Like, we just don't even see them again. But you're still out there. But what makes you a little bit different than a lot of people, you're also on the radar of all the people just had. Trump still talks about you. We will occasionally get a quote about, Beto O'Rourke. He'll take some shot at you about oil and guns and churches and whatever he's doing, right? And then in the Abbott team, they know where you are. They know what you're doing. And that brings me to, as you're doing this organizing with Powered by People, it's like, like I said, I kind of almost feel like you've become a de facto party. And it's like, no offense to the Democratic Party of Texas. They try what they have, but this isn't like New York or some of these other states in the Northeast where the Democratic Party has a ton of money. It can, put its fingers on scales and pick candidates and all that. We don't really have that with both in the Texas Democratic Party and the Republican Party. On the statewide level, they just don't have those same kind of powers that we think of. But as you've been doing it, like as you've been doing the voter registration, as you've been recruiting candidates, as you've been, trying to fire up voters, those are all things parties used to do. And I think the interesting part is it's not just that you're doing that stuff, but you also help fund the resistance in terms of the Democrats who fled the state in the summer and ended up going to Chicago to try to stop the redistricting plan. You're right out there, front and center, helping fund this stuff. That all brings a lot of attention to you. Ken Paxton then says, I'm going after Beto O'Rourke. I'm going after Powered by People, and has just tangled you up in courts. And I wondered, it's like, I haven't been able to talk to Attorney General Ken Paxton about this, but it feels like it's trying to put you on the sidelines, to take your money away and take your platform away, to the point where they were trying to get a gag order and get you to stop talking, right? And it's like, it feels like a lot of attention. It's like, how is Powered by People in this, and has Paxton damaged y'all financially?
Yeah, so a bunch of great questions rolled into that. First, I just want to clarify, Powered by People, our volunteers, our team, and I'm one of those volunteers. We're doing just fantastic, amazing, essential, critical work across the state of Texas, but we're doing it in partnership with the Texas Democratic Party, an exciting, bold new chairman in Kendall Scudder, with local county parties, with the precinct chairs, with other organizations who are out there, with candidates and office holders. Just look at the state house Democrats who, as you mentioned, left the state of Texas to deprive the Republican counterparts of a quorum necessary to pass those maps. Were successful in that first special session. They lit a fire under Democrats nationally, so much so that Gavin Newsom met this threat in Texas, these 5 stolen seats, with 5 redrawn seats in the state of California, 5-5. I have not seen Democrats with that kind of spirit in a long time. And we issue white papers and we decide by committee and we're going to dot every I and cross every T. He said, F that. If you're going to play this game, I understand the rules. I'm going to play it as well. And we see that taking place in Virginia right now, in the great Commonwealth, which itself may redistrict to meet this challenge from Trump. So that was all of us working together in the state of Texas. But yes, Jeremy, it comes at a price. Ken Paxton accused me of bribery, promised to put me behind bars. He didn't say that privately. He broadcast that on social media, took me to court in Tarrant County, got a favorable ruling from an Abbott-picked Republican judge, and really had us on the ropes. We spent more than $400,000 in our legal defense because, look, the point wasn't to put me behind bars. He knows he could never convict me. It wasn't even to prove these completely baseless allegations. It was to bleed us dry of the resources we need to support our volunteers out in the field. But lo and behold, we fought him toe to toe. We appealed this to the 15th Circuit Court, every single one of whose judges was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott, not my best friend, not someone
I've noticed.
I see eye to eye on just about anything.
He puts you in a lot of fundraising letters, though. It almost seems like you guys are friends.
Right.
Help Stop Beto is like one of the most popular, fundraising emails I've ever seen from the Abbott team.
I don't doubt it. But that 15th Circuit Court, again, all Republican judges, ruled overwhelmingly in our favor. They essentially, and I'm paraphrasing their judgment, this is they said of Ken Paxton, you have proven none of your allegations. In fact, you have tried to deprive Beto O'Rourke, powered by people, and other Democrats in the state of Texas of their constitutionally protected First Amendment rights. Not only did that feel good because it removed us from this frivolous legal jeopardy, but it felt good that regardless of party difference, there's something that still binds us together, and that's the United States Constitution. It is the thing that separates us from the rest of the world and most of human history, that we are equal under the law, regardless of whatever differences racially, religiously, ethnic origin, or politically. And so, look, with this opportunity we have now that it has been confirmed that we had done nothing wrong, we are going to do everything we can to make sure that we reach every single voter that we can bring into this election, turn them out, and ensure that they have the opportunity to be the margin of victory in a contest that will decide the future, the fate, and the fortune of this country. It all comes down to Texas, as I think it should, given our outsized role in this country's history and the opportunity we have to play in this country's future.
How do you keep this fire? You can see that energy and that passion in you, even though, I'm going to sound Republican on this, but even though you've lost 3 times. Like, right, it's like, certainly lost the governor's race and the Senate race, and the presidential race obviously, petered out towards the end. A lot of people take some lumps like that, and you can see the fire extinguishes. The public doesn't want this, But you're talking to me like you're ready to go charging out that door. It's like, yeah, what's that makeup? Where's that from?
Because if you make it about yourself and your ego, then you're going to get down and depressed and you're going to leave the field. If instead you realize that you are a part of something much bigger than yourself, every other volunteer who is out there organized, every Texan who's hurting right now, everyone who justifiably is absolutely pissed off at where this country is, not just because of Donald Trump, although he's the absolute worst of us, but also for Democrats who've held positions of power and public trust and squandered that opportunity to help the people that they purport to serve. This system does not work. It absolutely must be rebuilt and remade in the image of the average Texan out there who expects justice and equal treatment under the law and a fair shot at whatever they want to be able to do in their lives. That's what I believe in. And it doesn't matter if I'm an office holder, as I was for 3 terms in the United States Congress, or a candidate, as I was for those offices that you describe. I'm an American. I'm a Texan. I have someone who has the ability and power and resources in terms of my time to make a difference. And I'm going to do everything that I possibly can with it. And I'm not alone, and I'm not exceptional or unique. There are millions of people whose names you and I do not know who are doing the exact same thing right now. And so one other point on this, if you think about our history, there are folks who've been in the fight much longer than I have, who've taken lumps that mine don't even compare to. You and I may have talked about somebody that I wrote a book about, this guy Lawrence Nixon, an El Paso physician, a leader of the NAACP in my hometown, who, when Texas outlawed voting by Black Texans in 1923, took this case to the United States Supreme Court, won it not once, but twice, only to have the Texas state legislature rewrite the election laws to continue to disenfranchise him and every Black Texan in the state. It took this guy 20 years being persistent, having people say, hey, Dr. Nixon, go move somewhere else. Or, you've been defeated time after time again. Why don't you just give up and give in and just accept that this is how it's going to be? Not only did he ultimately prevail, ultimately through a Supreme Court decision called Smith versus Allwright in 1944, but he inspired the first president from the state of Texas, Lyndon Baines Johnson, to use all the political capital he had in 64 and 65 to pass and sign into law the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act that was, more than any other event since the Civil War, transformational for American democracy. So look, this work is important. It's never going to be easy. But if we leave the field of this battle, then we concede the victory to these other guys. And I'm not about to do that.
Well, and I should stop to let people know. So why the hell are we at Stubbs, right? It's like, I was trying to tell, people, it's like, look, if you've listened to the Texas Take for the last, 6 or 7 years, I'm always dropping Willie Nelson references. I'm always, talking about music or what I'm going to go see at a Stubbs or at Saxon Pub or down at Flora's Country Store or Green Hall, all of them. Like, I'm always traveling. And I wanted to have you on here because I think that your background in music, I think, is still interesting. I think there's still a lot of people who maybe not so familiar with it, but like you were in this band called Foss out in El Paso, and you were a guitarist, and it made me think, on the stage here, I've seen so many acts come through here and play on this, and and I've always been looking for that commonality from people in music and politics. Because I once had a musician who was a lead singer, I think the band was called Public Bulletin, and he said, there's something kind of crazy about wanting to stand up in front of a crowd and want everybody to love you. And it's like, and he was saying it from a music standpoint, but I thought to myself, that's probably the same thing for politics. When I met Charlie Crist, who was then the governor of Florida, I kind of had that same thing where, like he said, there's an adrenaline when he's up on that stage. It's something different. And so talk to me about, like, when you were in Foss, when you guys on stage at venues like this, I'm sure in El Paso, I don't know if you ever played out in Austin, but do you feel a common energy that you now feel a little bit in politics?
Yeah, I'll compare and contrast the two. But first, I want to say, just to answer your question, yeah, we played in Austin. The first tour, we couldn't get booked at Emos, which is where all the big punk bands were playing at the time. Of course, we couldn't get booked there, and we played the place. I think it was called the Pink Flamingo, and maybe there were 2 or 3 people who came to see us, in addition to the 5 or 6 regulars who were at the bar. But that was the life of a touring band that had just started out. But we also had some really great shows.
Did you guys try to get into the Liberty Lunch? Were you was the Liberty Lunch still open? Because like in the 90s, I until it closed, I was at the Liberty Lunch, and that, Stubbs actually has the rights to the Liberty Lunch name. If you look at the back of Stubbs, they have the sign from the Liberty Lunch, and this was meant to be kind of that.
That was Stubbs was like beyond a dream, right?
Yeah,
This place is so legendary. If you look at like the quintessential music venues on the planet, Stubbs stands out. I mean, this in so many ways has made the reputation for the city of Austin and the state of Texas when it comes to music. We were just talking earlier about, Metallica plays here,
right?
At the height of their popularity and their fame. They could play sold out stadiums around the world. They want to play here at Stubbs. Bob Dylan plays here at Stubbs. So no, this was, beyond a dream for us to do anything like this. But to the point of your question, there's something about being in, we toured in a station wagon, believe it or not, 4 guys, all of our amps, drum kits, and clothes, 2 changes of clothes for a month and a half around the country and throughout Canada. There's something about being on the road, going to a new city, meeting people, listening to their stories through the bands who are singing them, getting up on stage and telling your own story through the songs that you have written and that you're singing back at the people who are there. The folks that you meet, the kindness upon which you depend. I mean, there was never enough money from a show to rent a hotel room. So you would sleep on the stage or on the floor, or somebody say, hey, I've got a couch at my house. Do you want to come back? Or you may just be sleeping in the station wagon that night. But there was this camaraderie and, common purpose and cause and just amazing joy at being out there together and doing this thing. And doing it in punk rock, you were by definition doing it outside of major labels and corporate radio and all that stuff. And it was incredibly exciting and liberating. That Senate campaign felt like that. Being packed in a minivan with 2 other folks.
Oh, that explains all that. It explains all the Facebook videos, right?
Yeah, and here we are. We're showing up town to town, meeting complete strangers, listening to them. There were always 2 microphones at every event that we held, and then sharing our point of view as well, and then coming together afterwards and realizing there is so much common ground, so much common cause, so much joy in the work that we're doing right now. And that really fueled that campaign and the best of them that I've made. And then the last thing, about being on stage, the best of that is when you just connect everybody in that room with what's going on. I remember the second day of the Senate campaign, I was in Houston, Texas, a brand new candidate. I was at the IBEW hall. The place was packed. I don't know, the capacity was 800. There were 1,000 people in the room. I didn't have a prepared speech. I've never read a speech in my life. I've never recounted a prepared speech. I go with what I'm thinking and what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. And I got up in that room and it was transcendent. Every word that came out of me felt like it was pulled by the people in the room. We were all thinking and saying the same thing. What's happening in this country is fucked up. And we have got to do everything we can with what we have right where we are today in Houston to change that. And that was the gist of it, right? And man, it felt so beautiful. Again, not about me, not about the candidate, not even about the political party, all of us coming together who are going to do something that is going to change the world. And even though I did not win, you pointed this out earlier, a lot of other people did win.
Yeah.
I don't know that Lena Hidalgo is a county judge of Harris County, fully flipping that county into our column, unless we were all running that campaign together.
And not many people realize Harris County was a Republican county. Greg Abbott had won it in 2014. Ted Cruz had won his hometown and has never won it since that race that you were at the top of the ticket.
17 black women elected to judicial positions in Harris County. Absolute sea change there. State reps, members of Congress. And again, it was not me. It wasn't even our campaign. It was all of us doing this together. So the best shows I've been at have had that. It's not the high and mighty rock star and you are so lucky to be in their presence. It's, hey, we're all doing this together. The best thing about punk shows is that there was never a stage. I mean, at the best of them that I've been to is the band was literally playing, they were standing on the same level literally that you were, and you were this close to them, and there was nothing different about them from you. You're in this together. And so that's the best of our politics is, not paying homage to some potentate or powerful figure who's got more money or connections or resources than you. She or he is just like you. You could be in that position. Maybe you should be. So I love Powered by People because it is as grassroots, as punk rock, as DIY as you can possibly get and still be in politics in America right now. And that's why I'm so grateful to be doing this work over the course of this year.
One of my favorite band or singers right now is Zach Bryan. He just put out an album and he has this song called Anyways on there. And as you're talking about, I was thinking about it. Like there's this fear, there's these people who are like trying to pull him down, but he just gets this reminder. It's like you still have the fire in your eye and you still got to go do this. So like when you have a show and you only have 2 or 3 people and nobody was into it, the next night you have another show. And you gotta get, remember why you're doing it. Remember, you still had that energy and that ability to do it the night before.
And he brings it. I saw him in Dallas. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before with my daughter who turned me on to him. Never heard of him before. Didn't think I liked that kind of music. And his songwriting and the energy that he brought with that band just absolutely lit that place on fire. And he's one of the biggest stars in America right now, but you wouldn't know it from his humility, from the passion, from the energy that he put in. He was taking nothing for granted. No laurels for him to rest on, giving it his all like it was his last chance to make it. So I love that kind of energy. And I've seen bands. One of my favorite stories, I was in DC. I was really into this band on SST Records called The Leaving Trains. And one of my favorite bands, they had this record called, I think, Kill Tunes. It was one of my favorites. They were coming to town. I told all my friends, we got to come out. We were the only audience there. And those guys played their hearts out like they were playing to, the biggest stadium in the world because they loved what they were doing. And we had paid our $6 to get in and they were going to put on a great show. And I've always thought about that. If I show up in a county or have a town hall and, 12, 15, 20 people show up, you know what? Those 12, 15, 20 people took time out of their day to be with us. And we're going to make sure we show them the respect, give them everything that we've got, bring them into this, and then work together coming out of this door. And so, there's a lot of crossover between music and I think specifically the spirit and ethic of punk rock music and the best of what we can do within politics in this democracy.
Well, and obviously, so, there you go. All you need to do is start up a band, get used to being on stage, get used to some rejection, then be able to put yourself in politics.
That's
and
right.
You'll have a thicker skin to deal with it, and you'll be able to have that pace to kind of like how, because I think that's the question. Like, one of the key fundamental pieces when people ask me about the 2018 election cycle, what was so different about that from your vantage point as a journalist? I'm like, one of the big things was how early in the race Beto O'Rourke got in there. As I think, I don't know if you remember this, but it was in the summer of 2017 when I first met you, and you had already been on the trail for months.
I've been on the trail for 6 months, and it was, it wasn't too unlike what we're talking about in terms of music. We were going town to town, and again, maybe 6, 8, 10 people show up. Well, that's all right. You showed up. I'm here. I'm going to learn about what's going on in your community. I'm going to share with you why I'm running. And over time, it builds and builds and builds. When I ran for Congress against an entrenched incumbent who outspent me 4-1, I won not because I raised more money, because I didn't, not because I had better name ID. I didn't. I won because I went door to door 16,000 times myself personally. and met the voters who were going to decide the outcome of that election. You have got to put in the work. And in this age where there is so much that our phones can do, where there's so many billions of dollars sloshing around in our politics, we become overly enamored of what money can buy. And we lost sight of the fact that the human to human, person to person, eyeball to connection that you and I are making right now is the most profoundly powerful thing in our democracy. And if you are willing to do that work, it's not easy. And it takes time, and you won't see the fruits of it right away, then you will have a chance to build the political power necessary in order to win these elections.
Yeah, and there's a logistical nightmare about Texas that is so unlike anything that somebody from New Hampshire could ever possibly understand, of trying to get around the state in a short window of time. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to Democrats particularly Democrats who are trying to run statewide, or and this happens to Republicans as well, and I'll ask them, why are you in this race so late? Almost every single one of them is in so late to me. And I just, and you guys had, like, even in those early months, I remember seeing you, I think we were near Rice Village. You had an event, and there was like a passion and energy, like the election was it was going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
We were like a year and a half away from you ever going toe to toe with Ted Cruz, but you brought that early. And so like, I know a lot of campaign people, and I know a lot of, people getting into politics, listen to this show. Like, I've said it for years. You tell me. It's like, if you had advice to these people, get out there early. Don't be afraid to put your neck out there sooner.
Absolutely. Part of it is, if you are going to win, and if you're going to win as a Democrat in Texas, this is the most voter-suppressed state in the union. It's harder to cast a ballot. It is harder to register to vote in this state than it is in any of the other 49 in the union. If you're going to win against this kind of entrenched power, this tilted playing field, this rigged system, you have got to work 10 times harder than the other side. That means being out 10 times earlier than the other side. That means doing 10 times the work that the other side is doing, and ideally raising 10 times the money. We probably will never be able to do that, but do the other things if you possibly can. And then also, here's the other thing, Jeremy. I mean, I got into the race early in 2017 because I understood how late the hour was. Donald Trump had just won on this incredibly hateful, xenophobic, nativist platform. I knew he was going to destroy this country if we allowed him to. I was going to do everything I could, even though it was a long shot of long shots, as an unknown West Texas congressman, to take on Ted Cruz, who was the runner-up to Donald Trump in the Republican presidential primary in 2016. This was a snowball's chance that we were going to do this, but I had to do what I could with what I had, where I was. I feel that now. We were out and it was pretty damn cold on the UT campus.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was there December 1st of last year when it was spitting rain and snow and wind. And we stayed out there for 5 or 6 hours to meet every single student that we could, because I'll never get that day back again. I'm going to use it with all that I've got. We took an hour break, went back out there and had a town hall with the students. I'm going out right after I leave here to ACC. So look, I'm certainly not doing this for myself. I'm not on the ballot. I don't get anything from this. I don't even take a salary. I'm doing this because of how critical this work is, how urgent the work is, and how late the hour is. If we don't do everything we can, we're going to lose this country. And so that's what moves me to get in early, to move as hard as I can, and to bring as many people into this work as I can possibly find.
Well, and you brought up the voter registration. I'm glad you did, because I want to hit on this. I've written a lot about this thing I've called the blue spine, which I give your campaign credit for kind of lighting up and showing us. And what I want to get to is that the fact that, in Texas from 2000 to 2012, Texas had 12 million voters, and it added only 1 million in that entire 12-year period of time. That's all we had. It's because of the barriers that you were talking about earlier about voter registration. The population was growing leaps and bounds, but the voter registration rolls had only grown 1 million. But now, what happened after 2012 when Democratic groups like Battleground were getting involved in Texas and said, look, this is really hard to register voters, but we're going to have to figure out a way to do it because that's the only way. And so they started coming into the state, and you saw things change. And I'm not talking little change. Look what we saw from that point on. Again, the first 12 years, we added 1 million voters in Texas. Since then, we added 5 million in the same time period. You see, something has changed dramatically in the fundamentals of what we think of as Texas politics. And your campaign, in 2018, the reason why Republicans told me, at least the smart Republicans, were like, oh, this is a problem. we're watching this thing, because it wasn't just that voters were being registered, it's that you were engaging these new voters at just the right time. And so what we saw on that blue spine, the blue spine is this stretch of highway from I-35 that stretches from Laredo to Dallas. That, spine, when John Cornyn and Ted Cruz ran in 2014, 2012, respectively, they won that by 300,000 votes both times. It's like, and every Republican won that every time. When your campaign came along, you guys won that stretch, that I-35 stretch, by 400,000 votes. You see this swing that we went from being, for a Democrat, being in the red by 300,000 votes to being a net positive almost 500,000 votes. Y'all, that's like 1 million votes just on the I-35 corridor that flipped over. And what's key to that? The voter registration. As that registration number has changed, we've seen that these counties along the stretch, Williamson, Hayes County, Bexar County, getting much bluer than it had been. Remember, Bexar County, just like Harris County, had been voting for Republicans, frequently for statewide offices. That's not happening now.
You had Tarrant County in 2018 move blue for the first time in decades.
How about Collin County? Collin County, to me, is the quintessential how Texas's I-35 blue spine corridor has become urban, diverse, and sophisticated in a different way. And it's open to a Democratic message. Your campaign showed it. And even in bad Democratic years, like even though Kamala Harris got into the race late, had so much against her, she still won the blue spine. You can see the fundamental. She won the blue spine. She won Harris County. That's the new fundamentals of Texas. Like, I know a lot of people, it was a bad presidential cycle, but I think the fundamentals that were created in terms of the voter registration, some of the work y'all did, what Battleground did, and what all these groups have been doing, makes this state far more competitive going forward, even for the people who might feel like, oh, but we just lost again. We haven't won in 30 years. But the fundamentals are changing, and the Republicans know it. They're responding to it. They specifically say, up in Collin County, I talked to the Republican Party chairman up there, and he says, we can't rest. Every day. They've had to get much more sophisticated in getting new voters to counter Beto O'Rourke, Powered by People, Battleground. And so they're trying to respond to you guys to go one for one at least, so they're not going in the hole. That's a really long way to say. I think, when people say, we'll go, oh, is Texas going to turn blue or not? It's like, I kind of hate the question. It's a fun conversation, but the fundamentals of the state is what's important. And we've shifted dramatically in the voter registration, which I think gets me to Powered by People, right? It's like you guys are clearly identifying still more people to register to vote. I'd never seen this happen in Texas. Again, that 2000 to 2012, our population was going up. The voter registration was flat. Now what's happened is our voter registration is growing faster than the population, which tells you the backfilling that groups are doing to go get the people who weren't inspired before to vote, to go into Harris County, to go into Fort Bend County and get people to vote who had never voted before. So how do you, now not as a candidate, trying to be this, emissary to get people to register and to go vote? Those are two different things, right? How do you get that person who says, okay, by the way, y'all, February 2nd, deadline to register to vote. If you want to get into this primary, you don't have much time, go do it. Go check it out real quick. But beyond that, it's so how do you get that registered voter and make sure they become a voter?
The reason this question is so important is that after we came so close in 2018 in our campaign and others got over the line in that year, I mentioned Colin Allred, Lizzie Panel Fletcher, James Talarico in the State House, John Busey, who you mentioned in Williamson County, Williamson, Hayes, other counties, Harris, moving from, either red or competitive to pretty solidly blue. It wasn't just that Republicans said, hey, we gotta register more people, or we have to have a better message. They literally changed the laws around voting to make it harder for people that they assume are going to be Democrats who live in certain cities or counties like Harris County, or who have a certain demographic profile like students. In fact, removing the early voting location from the largest university in the state of Texas at Texas A&M. They used to think it was reliably red and conservative. It's a little bit more competitive right now, so let's stop them from being able to vote. So it's no longer sufficient to register people to vote, because that's what we were doing before. Hey, Jeremy, I've got you on the rolls now. Good luck. Get out there and vote. Well, if the state is actively trying to make it hard, maybe even impossible for you to cast that ballot, then that's insufficient to the task at hand. We've got to do more. So what Powered by People does is, in addition to training our volunteers to become volunteer deputy registrars, which makes them street legal to register someone to vote, we also train them and help them stay in touch with that voter over the course of the election. So if I registered you today, 30 days from now, I would send you a text from me personally, not a campaign or an organization. Hey, Jeremy, this is Beto. I met you on the UT campus about a month ago. Want to see if your voter registration card has come in. If you say no, then I'll go look it up on the Secretary of State's website or call their office, track it down for you, and get you the information you need. I'll remind you ahead of early voting the forms of voter ID that you'll need, because they're very specific in the state of Texas. You might have questions about the candidates. We're a partisan organization. I'll give you the information about those candidates to make sure that you're voting in a way that aligns with your values. And then when early voting comes up, I'll tell you where your nearest early voting location is, the hours, and I'll work with you to make a plan to vote. And then I'll check the next day with the county clerk in the county that you're registered in to see if you actually voted. And if you didn't, hey, Jeremy, I know you didn't get a chance to vote yesterday. Do you think you could cast that ballot today? If you don't today, I'll get in touch with you the next day, the next, and the next, until you get that thing in. All of us at one time or another in our lives need that nudge or reminder from someone. Powered by People does that. And that's why we took a voting rate for 18 to 29-year-olds from 37% statewide to those 18 and 29-year-olds that we registered and brought into our program and stayed in touch with to 80%. This stuff works, but I want it to work at scale. So I need more people who are willing to volunteer with Powered by People, to sign up with us, to receive our training. And then look, I'm not going to promise you that this is going to be easy. I need the people who say, hey, I'd like to go stand out on the UT campus or the ACC campus for 5 or 6 hours, no matter the weather, meet complete strangers, and do this really important work to bring them into this next election. If we're willing to do that, and the choice is ours, then I am confident that we can win political power in 2026, because look at the prevailing conditions. Donald Trump has never been more unpopular nationally. He's also underwater, as you know, in the state of Texas. His policies, whether it's cutting Medicaid in a state that's already the least insured in the nation, or keeping people in the basement with a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. These Gestapo ICE raids, not just in Minneapolis, but across the country, including in El Paso. I just saw a video on FitFam, which is one of the better IG news channels to know what's going on in El Paso, of ICE agents raiding construction sites in my hometown. You know, this stuff is deeply unpopular, in addition to the corruption and criminality that people see from our president and the foreign wars that he wants to involve us in. Once again, he's not going to win if we do the work necessary to overcome the way that he's going to try to rig these elections, intimidate his opponents, and steal the outcome in 2026. But we've got to do the work, and we can't do the work in October. We can't do the work in November. We got to do the work now in January and February and the months that follow.
And are you out there right now? Because I think you almost answered this already. That James Talarico, Jasmine Crockett race has already captured enough interest among Democrats and people just casual listening. If you're just listening to your popular podcast, or not even about politics, they're coming up in those, things. And it's like, it feels like, it's kind of grease for, people are aware of this now, and you're coming on campus at the right time to say, hey, you want to get involved in this thing? It's like, this is how you do it. And it's good. Because look, we take it for granted in politics. Like, I've been doing this for a long time, but it's hard for people to register to vote. Not because they're dumb. It's just because they're busy. People have their lives. They're not thinking about who their school board member is or their state rep. It doesn't mean they don't care who those people are. Like, they just have a lot going on. So just even registering to vote, they need all those pushes. And right now you have this Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico race. Are you hearing, at least anecdotally, that is getting people wanting to sign up with y'all?
Absolutely. Being on the UT campus yesterday, this came up time and time again. The drama, the friction that is generating the heat and the energy is drawing people in. And it's not just donors, and they're raising tens of millions, both of them, which is awesome for Texas, right? Because it will all be spent in the state reaching voters, engaging them, and bringing them into this next election. It's raising something that is at a premium right now, which is awareness. In this economy that prioritizes and rewards distraction, all these social media platforms that consume all of our time and attention, being able to get someone focused on this is, the key to the realm. And so The fact that they're running, I see as a real positive for Texas and for Democrats. And, understandably, some folks wondered, wouldn't it have been great if James was in this race and Jasmine was in this race and they weren't against each other? That's not what we have right now.
Yeah.
And so I tend to see the benefit of this, which is that they're generating outsized attention, outsized resources that are coming into this state. Whoever does not prevail is going to support the other. And whoever does win is going to be the stronger for the competition that was provided by their Democratic opponent in the primary. So I really see this as a win for Texas. And if we're doing the work on the ground, behind the scenes, registering, turning out, mobilizing, and reminding these voters, we're going to get this done. So we have to believe, we have to keep hope alive, and then we have to do the work to bring it to bear and to execute it in November.
Yeah, and remember, y'all, this is the guy who's been through his own primary. Like, you had to go through that Democratic primary for the presidential race, and that was rough. There were times when, you were, against Julian Castro, and he's taking shots at you. You're against the Bernie world. And now I see you on stage with these very same people that you once were having to compete
We're
against.
all in this together.
So a primary isn't necessarily the end-all, now we can never all talk again and be friends. There's going to be some rough moments, but there is a way, even after this, if Crockett or Talarico wins, it doesn't mean it has to be the thing that lingers and becomes a problem, going into the general election.
Right. Yeah. The line between us is not whether, your healthcare plan matches up with my healthcare plan. As Democrats, we want to make sure that everybody can see a doctor, receive life-saving medications, be healthy and well enough to work their job, to raise their kids, to go to school, to do whatever you were placed on this planet to perform in the first place. No, the line right now is, do you believe in government of, by, and for the people? Or are you a fascist? Do you want to support this would-be tyrant and this future dictatorship? Can you abide these Gestapo ICE raids in Minneapolis and across the country right now? Are you willing to aid the descent into tyranny and fascism that is happening right before our eyes? That's the only thing I care about. There is, by the way, no middle ground there. There's no consensus. There's no coming together. There's no, I guess I could see this from your perspective, or there's two sides to this argument. It is as clear as day what's going on. So all of those folks, and I don't even care if they're in the Democratic Party, by the way, but all those folks who believe in the United States Constitution, in the rule of law, in our democracy, in self-government, I'm on the same team with them, and I'm going to work with them, shoulder to shoulder, step by step over these next más o menos 10 months until we win the political power necessary to save this country.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the Texas Take, being on the Stubb stage finally. See, I brought the the guitarist from Foss onto the Stubb stage myself. If my harmonica skills were anywhere close to what I think they are, I'd be up on the stage at some point, but I never was. So thank you so much for taking out the time with us. And I definitely want to thank a lot of other people who helped get this together. Our producer Monty Bach ended up helping get all this together. Rachel Crocker, helping get this show out. And big thanks to Alejandro Matos, who really kind of put the support behind us to get this done, and the folks back at the Houston Chronicle who didn't think this was such a dumb idea and that they let me do it. So thanks to all y'all. And of course, I got to thank my buddies Matt and Jimmy, who took those drives from San Antonio to Austin in the dead of night when I was supposed to be I was supposed to be at the library, but I was at the Liberty Lunch or at Stubbs listening to the show. So thanks to all y'all for all the help in getting this Texas Take. And thanks to all you listeners out there who have continued to listen to the program, and be sure to tell all your friends about it. We got a lot going on here, y'all, and there's going to be more of this. You're going to see more interviews from us with big, important people in Texas politics from here on out. And plus, you'll still get the regular show, too, where we get every Friday, you get our normal Texas Take podcast. So thanks a lot for watching, and we will talk to y'all soon.